I'm excited to talk today with Jason Hunt, who's another Canadian. Love meeting other Canadians. And of course, he is a podcast host with 𝗪𝗁 Podcast and digital marketer. And he's going to talk to us about Facebook ads and driving top funnel awareness to our podcast. And obviously, Jason, we all use social media to promote our podcast, grow our audience. And I've heard rumbling of people using Facebook in, more than one way or Facebook ads. But let's kind of start kind of broadly. And why don't you share how you've grown your podcast and how you use social media to get new listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to back up for a second, I've had a social media agency for about 6 years now, and I merged that agency with an SEO company back in 2019 to form like a one-stop digital shop. Super important, right?
Yeah.
It allowed us to focus on, our areas of expertise and be specialists rather than just outsourcing all the digital stuff, right? So we do it all in-house and we all collaborate together. So as our team grew, as we grew as a company, we became specialists in certain areas. So my area of specialty became brand ambassador, putting my face out there, talking to potential clients and doing videos and doing a YouTube series. And now what the next logical thing was to do a podcast.
Absolutely.
So that's where I started the 𝗪𝗁 Podcast. And it gave us an opportunity to get our brand out there in more ways than just marketing on Facebook ads and cold calling and networking and doing all that sort of stuff. So it's another avenue to bring in awareness to our brand, and it has done a heck of a lot more than just that.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. What has been the most surprising for you?
The most surprising, I think, is the long-term value of the podcast. And I'll explain. So in terms of long-term value, like we've had clients listen to multiple episodes of the podcast, but I wouldn't know that. It's funny because I'd have a conversation with a potential client, and it'd be a very good conversation. So good. And they would want that proposal, and I'd send them over a proposal. And next thing I know, they're signing up, and I'm just like, wow, that was flipping easy. And it wouldn't be until that kickoff call where we get into a further conversation to understand that they've already listened to 3 or 4 episodes of the 𝗪𝗁 Podcast before they even closed. So they knew me before I knew them. So hence why that whole sales process was just so easy for me. And then from there, it's just like, these clients are not just good clients, they're great clients because they made the decision themselves to work with me, not some sleazy sales pitch. It's like they got to know me and know, like, and trust me. And now it's like, now we have, these clients that are with us for a very long time. You get a very long leash with those type of clients that come through that journey into our ecosystem from the podcast.
That's so true. And I love how you said it, like the sales process was so easy. It's like, really having a podcast allows you to show your personality and your expertise, but it does some of that heavy lifting and that legwork before you even have the sales call. And I get the exact same thing. And you're right, it is a long-term game. Now, how do you use social media then, or Facebook, I guess we're talking about today, to, besides just posting up and saying, woohoo, another podcast went live? There's obviously more to that. So what do you recommend, and how are you using it effectively?
Definitely. So, I mean, I'll tell you the journey that what I do, the process that I use for my podcast before answering that question, because I think that's important. So obviously, every single episode of the 𝗪𝗁 Podcast, we're cutting up clips. It's going to my team who's cutting up video clips, inspirational things that the audience, that my guests may say in that episode. And we'll create images and all of that sort of stuff, much of the stuff that you would do, Lyndsay, for your episode. And we'll put that out there organically. It's going on every single platform, much like yourself. I'd love to grab one piece of content and just amplify it. So it's awesome. It's going on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It's going everywhere. And but organically. And organic is important. Every podcaster is doing it organically, putting it on their platforms. But the problem with that is it's not getting a heck of a lot of reach. And in most cases, you're not really getting any new listeners to your podcast through just posting on your channels, right? So for us, as a digital marketing agency, we invest heavily on Facebook ads to generate new listeners for our episodes. So the way we do it is these clips that I'm talking about, had a great guest on a couple of weeks back talking about harnessing the power of the moon to make business decisions. Very niche type of an
That
episode.
is extremely niche.
Very niche. She's a real estate agent that uses the power of the moon to convince her buyers and sellers to buy or sell, whether it's a full moon, third quarter phase, whatever, right? But she is very interesting. And so that we'll use that specific episode as an example. So my team will cut up different clips from that episode along with the images. And what we'll do is, depending on what she's talking about in a specific clip, we'll target that specific clip towards a very specific audience on Facebook. So that one there, where she's talking about the moon phases and harnessing the power of the moon, we're targeting people on Facebook that have expressed interest in the law of attraction.
Right.
They're interested in astrology, but narrow it down even further. So we're only targeting people interested in the law of attraction as well as astrology, but are also entrepreneurs, which is our target.
Yes.
Right. So now we're not just getting every entrepreneur, and you know, a lot of them probably could care less about harnessing the power of the moon and the woo-woo stuff, but there is a subset of people that are very interested in that are also entrepreneurs. So that is the audience that we targeted with that clip to drive the traffic to our podcast page to get more listeners on that specific episode.
I love that. And just from I'm very logistical in my brain. So was that an audio clip or a video clip?
Video. So it's a video clip, and you might have seen similar clips out there where it's a video clip with a little caption at the top of it, something that specific clip is about, because that's going to get people to stop scrolling as they're going through their news feed at a million miles a minute. So we got to make sure that there's something that's compelling and captivating to that audience, and then obviously the copy of that is going to be a little more detailed in terms of what the episode's about. You know, I basically will put our entire show notes into the copy of that ad.
Oh, wow.
You know?
So really long form,
you know, the learnings, what you're going to learn from this episode, everything is going into the copy of that ad, because anybody that's watching that clip, I want to make sure that they are getting all the information they want to ensure they are getting value from the episode when they go to click that call to action.
Perfect. So really they're consuming it right then and there, the asset that you know, uploaded, but then they're also linking out to check out more, so to speak, the whole podcast episode and so forth.
And this, it's a couple of cool things about this. So one, when I generate that ad, what's happening is we're getting clicks to the podcast, which is great. But also I'm capturing people watching a percentage of that video.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what's that called? That's on Facebook. That's called custom audiences. Okay. So we can tell Facebook, could you please capture anybody watching 15 seconds of this 30-second clip? And I want to put them into a bucket. So essentially you're putting these people that watch 15 seconds of your podcast clip into a bucket, and then you can create a lookalike off of that, meaning that you can tell Facebook to go find more people out there in the world of Facebook that look like these people watching 15 seconds of this video clip. And then also this bucket of people is going to get retargeted. Okay. Sweet. So the lookalike audience is going to be a cold audience that has never heard of your podcast before. That's great for top of funnel to get them to listen to that clip or watch that clip. But this small little subset of people that have consumed your podcast are going to be delivered a different set of ads. It could be image ads for a different episode. It could be getting into your blog. It could be, you know, something a little more aggressive in terms of sales, but don't sell too soon. But what I'm saying here is to get them to take that action that you want them to take. Do you have the solution to their problem? Maybe give them some more details on that solution, something like that.
And I love how you're able to find who's actually interested in the topic that you're doing or your podcast in general, but also through that strategy, you're able to go after a new audience. Because really, Jason, that's what a lot of podcasters struggle with, right? Is, you know, getting and growing their podcast audience. So I love that strategy. Speak to us a little bit more about targeting, because you did touch upon that. And I find that is obviously crucial for your Facebook ads to be expensive and to be effective, but then also not cost you an arm and a leg.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talked about lookalike audiences, finding people that look like those people that are listening to your podcast. But also, making sure that, if you have a website that has the podcast on it, you want to capture those people hitting your website as well.
Right.
They could have found your website through a Google search. You want to make sure you're capturing those people too. So that, to go back, that's another custom audience that you can create on Facebook, is people that have spent time on your website. If you're getting a lot of traffic to your website, you can actually tell Facebook to create a custom audience of those people spending the most time on your website, not just clicking on it for a couple seconds, but the people actually consuming an entire podcast episode on your website. So that's a good audience as well. Now, like I said, with each individual episode is going to have a different audience. It's not going to be,
and I wouldn't naturally have thought of that. So when you said that about that moon episode, I went, oh, because naturally my thought would be to go after the target audience of my podcast in general versus like that specific episode. That's huge.
Yeah. Even if you're in a niche type of podcast, I think you can even niche it a little further than that, because the closer you can marry that message and that ad to the audience that's seeing it, the better results you're going to get. I just did an episode today with the CMO at PepsiCo Canada. And we talked about, obviously we talked about marketing and CMOs and culture and marketing. This is going to be very relevant to other CMOs out there, but it's not going to be relevant to those law of attraction, astrology, entrepreneur people so much. So I'm not going to target that audience with this specific episode. And I think that's one of the key takeaways is you just got to, micro it down just a little bit more than just being like, I want to target everybody in Canada that's a podcast listener. You know what I mean?
For sure. And that obviously, will make it that much more effective, and you'll get more ROI, more results. So taking video clips of if you are doing the video portion, I guess, of the podcast, do you do Facebook ads if people aren't, because not everyone does the video portion, right?
I've done 118 episodes and everybody's done the video portion. I haven't had,
really?
It's part of, that's one of the things is obviously it's important to tell your audience and keep them informed as to the structure and procedure as you go through this. So in our case, what we do is I have the podcast guest, they sign up. I use a Calendly link to book into my podcast, and it's very detailed as to what they can expect. It's going to be a video. You're going to be on video at this time. If they have a problem, they're not going to book a time for the podcast, right? So we haven't had any problems with that. I will say that we have had some episodes where kids have been a part of the podcast unexpectedly. I had this one episode where this lady had her daughter on her lap, and her daughter was sick, and I didn't have a problem with it. But she must have been about 2 or 3 years old, but she was on her lap. And in the video clip, all you see is like 4 hands up in the air. Like she got her 2 hands, and then the 2 hands of her kid are just up in the picture, like kind of scrolling around here. And it was just kind of awkward. It was tough for me to keep a straight face, but made for a pretty funny clip, and actually performed pretty well on Facebook, surprisingly.
I'm sure. To me, I'm like, life is life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't be like strict and professional and perfect all the time. It's like sometimes your dog barks, and sometimes, stuff happens. I don't know.
Exactly.
It shows that you're human and that you have a normal life.
And I mean, if somebody comes there and they're not prepared and you don't prepare them, you can't get mad at them, right? Like, you tell them that, if it's on video and they know that they're going to be on video, cool. Making sure the sound is good. I've had a couple people show up to the podcast from their car on their phone audio. It's like, oh, this is going to be a yard sale.
Man alive. Takes all kinds. Now, I do get people asking me like, oh, can I just boost a post that I do on Facebook about my podcast?
Good question. And the answer is no, I wouldn't do that. The boosting is the equivalent of telling Facebook to put your ad in front of as many people as possible without any rhyme or reason. So I like to say it's basically what you're optimizing for or telling Facebook to do is put your ad in front of people that scroll past content. Right? You're getting those people that just scroll past content that don't actually take actions on content. Right. They don't click on content. They don't engage on content. That's not the user you want. You're basically getting the scraps, right? So what you need to do is go into Facebook ad manager and tell Facebook, I want to get these ads in front of people that either A, watch video content. Okay. So Facebook will put the ads in front of people that actually watch videos. You can tell Facebook to put your ad in front of people that have a tendency to click on content and go to a website. That's optimizing for traffic. We do that all the time. So you're going to get a low click cost when you do that. Or you can optimize for engagement, which is people that like, share, or comment on content. That's another good one as well. And those are usually cheap. But when you optimize for, or when you boost, you're optimizing for brand awareness. So what happens here is if you look at the data and you spend $50 on a boost, you're going to see a lot of impressions. Cool. But you're not going to get anybody clicking on it. It's going to be a very high cost per click, and that's doing you nothing at all. Right. So, awareness is great and all, but people are not remembering your content. They're not engaging on it. And you want to get your ad in front of the right people on Facebook and Instagram.
So you're not investing your money in the right ways to get results.
It's your way. It's the easy way to do it. Facebook loves to do that because it's very easy for somebody that's not familiar with Facebook ads to sit there and click that blue button and be like, oh, I'm doing Facebook ads, boost. But it's not effective at all. But Facebook's they're going to take your money. It's the Facebook slot machine. They'll take it all day long.
Facebook slot machine. That's awesome. I've never heard that phrase. That's good. Now, how does Instagram play into it? Because I know obviously Facebook owns Instagram, and the ads are like connected in the back end of Ads Manager and so forth. Have you found more success with Facebook ads by itself, or are they effective with Instagram?
Good question. So what most people do is they won't create a creative custom for Instagram. So they'll just grab their Facebook creative, they'll grab their clip, they'll put it on Facebook, and Facebook will naturally serve it to Instagram. But Facebook's going to put that ad in front of people where they're engaging most on it, or taking that action you want them to take. And if your creative is not optimized for Instagram, Instagram stories, well, Facebook's just not going to show it to many people there, or the ads that are going to be shown there are the good ones that are optimized for it that people are engaging on or clicking on. So my suggestion is, if you have the bandwidth, is to create custom creatives for each of those platforms.
That makes sense.
But and also keep in mind, like, depending on your demographic as well, right? Like if you're trying to target women and men 50 plus, well, Facebook's a great platform for you because that's the fastest growing demo on Facebook and on Facebook. On Instagram, it's obviously a little younger. So you need to be cognizant of your demographic. But at the end of the day, use Facebook ads. Facebook will put your ad in front of the person that's going to convert best on your objective.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I haven't ever seen people do a lot of ads where it's different for Instagram than it is for Facebook. As you said, it's typically kind of the same, it just gets shared around, so to speak.
Yeah. And look, if you're short on bandwidth and don't have time, pick a square video at least. Okay. Because square video is better optimized on both platforms. It's not the most perfect size, as Instagram stories, it will be served there. But if you have a creative that's fully optimized with that size and not with that size, you're going to get the best result. Right. But that's the one that goes on both sides of the fence, as well as Facebook Audience Network. So I always go with square, but if you do have the resources to create those Instagram story creatives, as well as the Facebook newsfeed creatives, and then go ahead and do that. And then Facebook makes it very easy now. When you go through the Ads Manager on that last on the
Are you sure? Because I go in the back end and I'm ready to pull my hair out because they keep changing the interface every 5 minutes.
Well,
it's easy for you because you're the expert.
Well, if it wasn't so hard to navigate, I wouldn't have a business, I guess, right?
True.
But but honestly, it does make it pretty simple once you go through the process. I think people get a little gun shy because it is kind of overwhelming when you're in there to understand what is ad set, what is ad level, what is campaign budget optimization, all these words that you kind of sort of got to understand when you're in the Facebook platform to in order to put some budget behind it and see results. But at the end of the day, and this is what I say to every business, every one of our clients, it's like, we got to test, right? What you think works. You might think you have the most perfect ad copy and the most perfect clip, perfect image. Facebook doesn't care.
No.
All that matters is what Facebook likes. And that's why we test so much, right? We're testing 5 different ad copies, 5 different creatives, as well as headlines. And Facebook's going to find the perfect match on what works best. And once you have that insight, you double down your budget on what's working.
Yeah. Now, speaking of finding out what's working and what's not working, what kind of metrics, when you're creating these Facebook ads to get more awareness on your podcast, what metrics should you be looking at? Like, how do you really know what's successful and not, and where your money's going? And
yeah, it's a good point. Good question. And I mean, for us, it's being cognizant of the customer journey, right? So for us, I mean, we'll probably spend about $10 to $20 a day on pushing the podcast, and which is roughly, it's not bad, which is roughly probably about 25% of our budget, right? And that's just top of funnel. That's cold audiences, right?
Yeah.
We want to bring people into the podcast that are cold, that haven't heard of us, and because they're going to get value from talking about harnessing the power of the moon. Cool, awesome, and then they're going to get targeted with another podcast episode after that, and another clip, this and that, and also send them over to our blog to read about lead magnets and nurture sequences, which is things that we specialize in.
Yeah.
And so once they're over there and they hit our website, well, that Facebook pixel's there to track them, to tell us that, hey, this user's been on the website.
Right.
Cool. Now we can get a very specific ad in front of them to be like, yo, let's book a discovery call. Let's see if we can work together. So it's this journey that they're going on. And so, like I said at the beginning, direct ROI on the podcast is tricky because,
it is.
I don't pull every client that comes in here and being like, hey, did you listen to the podcast?
I know.
There's a good chance they did. And even if let's say they became a client, well, they're still going to see the podcast, and I hope they listen to it still, because it still provides that value add. Lifetime customer value is huge there too. Another benefit of the podcast. And I think the third big benefit of the podcast, Lyndsay, and I'm sure you can attest to this, is the relationships that you build with your actual guests.
Absolutely.
It's huge. I mean, the guests that I bring on are guests that I see bring value to the audience, but also I have an opportunity to do some business with them.
Yeah.
And it's a good way just to bridge a new relationship with somebody. So, and then they get to see the way my company works when we come up with the creatives and the clips and tag them on social. So it's a really good sort of relationship builder with those people that are on our podcast.
Absolutely. Collaboration and networking is absolutely key. Some people that I've interviewed years ago, I'm still friends with, and we chat every now and then, or we're doing a partnership together, or referrals. It's like, that's definitely one part of podcasting that I didn't really anticipate, because I was more focused on lead gen and exposure and that kind of thing. But there's so many layers. I do want to ask you one more question, and that is about which podcast episode, I guess you could say, that you choose for your Facebook ads. Like, do you change it up quickly, or do you wait to see, hey, which episode over the last 6 months got a lot of downloads? I'm going to pick one that got a lot of traction and therefore use that for a Facebook ad to get in. Like, is there a strategy behind that?
I love this question, and I'm so glad you asked it, Lyndsay, because this is kind of the fun part. So, so what we do is I always have 3 different episodes pretty much going head to head in a competition week over week.
Cool.
So 3 episodes will always be running an ad towards them. And I'll go into the data every week, every Friday. I'll go in there and be, okay, which one is underperforming out of those 3?
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, no matter how great your Facebook ad is, it's going to saturate over time.
Yes.
People are going to see it. Your ad frequency, which is how many times people see it, goes up, and the saturation happens and the ad cost goes up. So as long as the 2 that are winning will stay in there, but the one that's not and underperforming, I'll cut it and I'll add in the last week's episode. So every single week we're updating that. Right. And then if one keeps getting the lowest cost per click, I'm going to let that run forever, so long as that cost is where it needs to be.
That makes sense. And it's funny. It's like, I'll look back at stats and I'm like, oh, there's this podcast from years ago that is still like growing with downloads that I would not have anticipated. And the ones that you think, oh, this topic's going to take off, doesn't necessarily. So looking at that data is very telling and can be really quite surprising.
Yeah, one thing we'll just make sure that those audiences, like I talked about niching those audiences down, we'll try to have them around the same ballpark size.
Oh, that makes
Because
sense.
yeah, because if you have one audience that's super duper niche and and that audience size is maybe 100,000 people compared to this next episode that has an audience size of 5 million, well, obviously your lower cost is going to be with the bigger audience because you have a bigger pool of people. So just to keep things equal, you want to kind of keep that that audience size around the same. We have one episode that's been going on ads forever, and it's talking about sales automation. And we're targeting salespeople in North America. And this one here is just crushing it. And it's been there for probably about 6 weeks now. So it just continues to get low cost clicks. So we'll just keep that running all day long.
That's awesome. Now, do you feel like when there's like a new podcast and they just launch, like, should they wait until their podcast has been going for 6 months? Is it like, veterans like you and I that should be doing Facebook ads? Is there a right time to start?
Yeah, start. Why wouldn't you start right away? Right? Like, why wait?
Except for the first couple episodes are always kind of
but you know what? It's okay.
It's content.
Look, exactly. It's content. The proof's in the pudding, and the numbers don't lie. So it's funny because I'm sure as you get better with your podcast and you capture better clips and people become familiar with your face and your name, then naturally that cost is going to come down. Right. And so you'll probably see 1 or 2 episodes that are like, wow, these ones here are performing really, really good. And maybe we should pivot our episode a little bit here to be geared towards this audience, which is something that's very interesting. It's like using that data to test, to find out who your ideal audience is. I'll give you one example of this, which is off the podcast topic, but I recently had a book written and I didn't know what to title the book. So I actually grabbed 10 different titles and I threw some money on Facebook ads targeting a worldwide audience. And I went with the title that got the most clicks.
Interesting. You know what I mean?
Why you can do that for your podcast.
I would never have thought of doing that in a million years.
Why not? I mean, we spent $50, not a big deal, but now I have a great title for my book that I know works. You know what I mean?
Smart. Look at you. So I do not want to touch Facebook ads myself because I'm way too busy in my own life and my podcast. So how can other podcasters tap into your brilliance and get your help?
Yeah, definitely. You can go over to merged.ca, merged.ca. You can also find my podcast there as well. It's /podcast. But there you can book in the form there and you can have a discovery call with me to see if we can help you generate clips, generate traffic for your website, do your ads, do your clips, do your show notes. We do all that stuff for clients if they ask, and we can definitely help out you if you have any questions. And give us a follow on social. For sure. Merged Media.
And tell us a little bit about your podcast. Of course, we have to give a shout out to your podcast.
Oh, amazing. Appreciate that, Lyndsay. So it's merged.ca/podcast, the Merged Marketing Podcast. If you're watching, you can see it right there.
Yes.
So right there, you go there, you can find that basically it's geared towards entrepreneurs, marketing people, giving marketing tips and, mindset for business owners as well. The entrepreneurial space can be a challenging one at times. So we address everything from the digital marketing challenges entrepreneurs might face to the work-life balance. A lot of people have challenges. So,
it's all part and parcel, isn't it?
100%. So if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner or a marketing person, then definitely go and check it out. The Merged Marketing Podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your tips. You've inspired me to maybe look at Facebook ads to grow my audience.
Hey, not a bad idea. Get her done.
I know. Absolutely. Who doesn't want a new audience and more listeners on an ongoing basis?
Or the data, or to understand who your audience really is.
That's so good. Awesome stuff. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Lyndsay. Appreciate it.